Buckle up, gentlemen. We are going into the desert where we are going to get ascetical in preparation for Lent. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us to another episode of The Catholic Gentleman. We've got an amazing priest, Father Innocent, with us today. Before we get there, we are your hosts, Sam Guzman and John Heinen, here at The Catholic Gentleman. Again, so grateful that you are with us. If this is your first time, please click subscribe, click that bell button so that you can get notified anytime we come out with a new episode. If you're listening to us on a podcast player of choice, subscribe so you can get those notifications as well. And finally, Sam and I love to do this, but more importantly, we love to help the lives of men, and we love to impart what we can do and God's, as God's grace, God's instruments to men in this world, in a world that's really struggling to understand what authentic masculinity is. So if you have been inspired by The Catholic Gentleman through the memes, through the blogs, through any of these shows, we greatly appreciate you heading over to patreon.com/Catholic Gentleman and discerning giving to us. Any amount, $5, $10, goes a long way for us to continue expanding this ministry. So again, like I was saying, we have Father Innocent Montgomery on the show today. He grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska as one of a triplet. And his triplet brother is also a priest with him in the same order, the CFRs. He attended St. Gregory the Great Seminary for his undergrad in philosophy, and he entered the Friars in 2007, spent many joyful years serving the homeless and drug addicts in St. Anthony's Shelter there in the Bronx. And he made his final vows in 2012 and was ordained a priest in 2016. His master's thesis work in seminary was Christological anthropology. He now serves as the postulant director there at the CFRs, which is the Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, if you don't know. He's accompanying the young brothers in early formation as they learn how to pray, live in fraternity, and love and serve the poor. One of his greatest joys is to bless people in their identity as sons and daughters of the Father. Today, we're going to be addressing sons of the Father. So, yeah. Father Innocent, thanks so very much for joining us. How are you doing?
Hey guys, I'm so humbled to be with you guys. It's such a gift. I'm ready to dive in. It's awesome.
Well, we're so glad you're with us, and I'm so happy to hear that you're still living in your baptismal innocence. I mean, it is really a miracle. And we heard the stats about you, though, just kind of the facts, in your bio there. But you just hit a big milestone as a priest. Just tell us a little bit about your life and what really brings you joy, and maybe what some struggles are. But you've been in the CFRs for quite a while now.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up my name. It's a thing, right? People have never met anybody who's named Innocent before, right? And I wasn't born with that name.
Spoiler alert.
But yeah, exactly. Well, that's not. I mean, it's funny. My name is Father Innocent. My triplet brother is Father Angelus. So you guys know that means angel and innocent. Yeah. And my mom was like, obviously no one consulted her before they gave us our religious names. But yeah, again, I'm just coming out. It's pretty funny. I was telling in show prep, I'm just coming off of a 30-day retreat. And so I'm joking that I have a lot of pent up spiritual energy. So if it just kind of comes out, just be warned. But I love being a friar. I love being a priest. And in 10 years into this, it's just, the community is so wise that they gave us some space. They give us some space to kind of go away and be with the one that we love. Right. And so 30 days with Jesus, the gift of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, the gift of silence, the gift of just going back to the beginning. Right. And so I was just kind of with the Lord, just being grateful for the journey. Right. Again, you're not born a friar, right? I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I know you guys probably know, but it's a blessed place to grow up. It's a great diocese. Yeah. And the gift of the priesthood was a real part of my journey. There was at least 10 to 12 young Catholic priests at our high school. Mm-hmm. Right. And I remember being a freshman in high school, and I never really had contact with the gift of the priesthood. And I met these men who were just on fire and who you could tell were just prayerful, and They were just all in for the Lord, and they were just giving their lives in such joy and like their humanity, right? They weren't weird. Their lives were attractive, and they had something. I was like, whoa, there's something different about these men, right? And they were just faithful priests. And I remember as a young high school kid, I think vocations are kind of caught. They're not necessarily like, you just don't like, they just don't fall from the sky. Like I was inspired, right? When young people see a holy married couple, there's like, man, like I want that. When they see a priest or religious, like something happened to me when I saw this, and what started just happening in my heart was I started to desire to be fully alive. And I grew up Catholic. We went to mass on Sundays, but my parents, I mean, God bless them. I love them dearly, but they still think we're crazy. They never thought two of their kids would want to be priests or even more crazy religious CFRs, you know?
Yeah.
But I something happened in my heart when I was in high school. And I remember one priest, Father Brian Kane, he taught me how to pray, right? He taught me about Jesus' presence in the Blessed Sacrament, the gift of that he's real and he's alive. He told me to start making visits to the chapel. And I was like, I've never heard anything like this. And my brother's like, I just remember kneeling there one day and asking for the grace to believe. And it was a time of struggle. And I was actually struggled with depression in high school. And I just felt alone and kind of at the end. And there's just like sadness in my heart. And I remember Father Kane telling me that in the chapel, like in the chapel, Jesus is in the Blessed Sacrament. He's there and he's waiting for you and he wants to have a relationship with you. And brothers, I just remember kneeling down there in front of Jesus. And I remember like the candle, the red candle, and no voice came from the sky, and it wasn't flashy, but I remember the first time in my life feeling I wasn't alone. I remember Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. Jesus like broke into my life, and that changed everything, right? I began to visit the chapel more, and people thought I was weird, right? I was like the football player. I was in the plays. People just didn't have a context for this. And I just remember spending more and more time with Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, going to daily mass. And my brother and I kind of had this conversion at the same time, just growing in our faith. And so it was very natural for me to be open when some priests were like, my baptismal name was Scott. It's not really inspiring. That's not like cool. Saying it.
No, Scott, exactly. Good choice changing.
But yeah, exactly. It was that's worth changing. So I just had these priests encourage me to be open to giving my life to God and to following Jesus, right? And again, as my prayer developed, I went to diocesan seminary, which was an incredible experience. But it was in this time, and I guess this is the main kind of thrust of my religious call is I love the diocesan priesthood. All my best friends are diocesan priests, and they're just holy men. But I had something happened when I grew in relationship with Jesus and in this intimacy. I just felt that he was calling me to be consecrated. Like there was this deep desire to give up everything and come follow him. Right. And kind of this intensity, right. And I don't know if you guys picked this up yet, but I'm kind of an intense dude. Yeah. So there was something about just a religious call, like being called to consecrated life. And in Nebraska, we really have no context of that. We have the Benedictine monks close by in Atchison, which are really solid, but I had no contact. Yeah. And so my brother and I decided that one summer we'd go spend some time with the Missionaries of Charity in New York City. And we were just going to go on mission and just kind of spend this summer in the inner city and kind of see how the Lord used it. And I mean, I love the MCs, but they're way out of my league. I say MCs put the CFRs to shame. But the last day of our summer camp with the kids, this crazy looking man in a long beard and with a gray robe walked in. And I was just had that experience of being captivated by this man's witness. Yeah. He was in love with the Lord. Again, he was all in. You could tell he was a man of prayer. His joy just like flowed out of him. You could tell that something was happening in his heart, that he knew Jesus in a really personal, particular way. My brothers, I just remember being like, I don't know what that is up there. Like he looks weird, but there's something that captivated me by this consecrated man.
Yeah.
Right. And that started a journey of graduating minor seminary in 2007. And I had made visits to the CFRs. And I just kind of made the plunge, right? I was like, Lord, if you're calling me to go all in, the only way I can respond is just, okay, like, I'm going to try this. I'll give up everything I have from the cornfields of Nebraska to the concrete jungle of New York City. I'm going to come follow you. Right. Yeah. And it's an oversimplifying, but from that, yes, to move to New York City, I just have been on this incredible journey with the Lord of just growing in my desire and my capacity to be consecrated to him, to give him everything, to receive everything from him, to again, the vows of poverty, chastity, obedience. Right. And then incredible gift of 2016 is that, as consecrated men, our consecration is kind of the foundation of our lives. Right. And then the priesthood kind of is joined to this pretty incredible reality. Right. So in 2016, I became a priest, got ordained by Cardinal Dolan in New York City, and just been living the dream ever since of being just consecrated to Jesus.
Amen. I think that's so wonderful. And I have to ask, who is the man with the long beard that you were inspired by?
His name is Father Luke Mary.
Okay.
Do you know Father Luke?
I don't know.
Yeah, he's Luke, I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He's amazing. He's a Steubenville grad. He actually is good friends. I know you know Father Pio. He's good friends with Father Pio. They were great. Kind of the generation before me, but Father Luke Mary was the one.
Yeah, that he inspired you. You looked at him. He said, "Hey, he looks like a Jedi," and this is exactly
like the whole thing, like the hood. Like
you do Jedi mind tricks.
It's funny. I can't, but you spoke of my twin brother, our triplet brother, Father Angelus, and even that's wild. I'm 2 minutes older in life. And my sister's older. We should say that she's the queen. She's amazing. She is married, pregnant with number 7.
Praise God.
So the joke is that she is making up for all the kids that her celibate brothers are not having. But she's the queen. She's the holy one. And then you have the 2 brothers, but I'm the middle. And then Father Angelus is 2 minutes behind me. But the funny thing is I'm 2 minutes older, 2 years older in religious life, and 2 years older in priesthood.
Yeah.
So it's just the story of Father Angelus's life. But we do pretty funny things. I don't have like a Jedi mind trick, but we do very funny things. Obviously we're twins. We look exactly alike. We talk exactly alike, but we live in the same friary now, which is wild. People get confused often.
I bet.
But when we lived in different friaries, I'm telling you, it's so funny. We'd call each other at the exact same time. It was just always these funny things. I'm like, hey, I tried to call you. I just tried to call you. It was busy. It's just very funny.
I will say 11 years into my marriage, same thing's happening with my wife, where we're just like sharing a mind almost, where like we think of the things at the exact same time and call each other at the same time. So,
but that's beautiful, right? There's something awesome about that. That's really the gift, the sacrament of marriage. It's the two or the hearts and the minds are just becoming one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's so cool. I mean, I really loved hearing your story, and now I can say your joy is very infectious, and I think it's awesome that as kind of like you're a novice master right now, so you've got all these younger guys coming in to the CFRs, and you get to mentor them and kind of lead them in this journey. And I guess what I'm one thing I'm kind of interested in is like. You probably meet a lot of people who are maybe discerning what's next in life, or who maybe have just decided to take the plunge into the CFRs, or maybe even people who like aren't anywhere on the religious radar. And in your experience, like what is the deepest longing of young men today? Like what is the hunger in their heart that is the missing piece, so to speak, that the people are really looking for?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think of the young man I just sat next to on the plane coming back from my 30 day. I hadn't talked to anybody in 30 days. And I again, may be a parent, but I like to talk. I like to connect. Right. So this young man sat next to me, and very, very respectful and very talkative. And he actually joked. He's like, hey, I forgot my same outfit at home. That'd been weird if we would have been dressed alike sitting next to each other. Right. So he was very comfortable, and he's a fallen away Catholic, right? Grew up in Northern Connecticut, and God bless him. He went to went to a Catholic boarding school, but it was powerful for me because they were like, yeah, Father, like it was all intellect. And they didn't introduce me to God.
Yeah.
And he's still in his early 20s, and he's like, and I still haven't encountered him. Right. And so as I was speaking with him, and again, the longing of his heart, and he's very smart. And so he's doing, I think the Lord is using his journey of kind of the intellect, right? As we know, is a gift, and the Lord can use that to come deeper into the church or into encounter, right? But he also realized that you can't stop with our minds, right? You can't just think yourself into the church. You have to have experience of the heart, right? And it's both, right? The gift of this relationship. And the more and more I sat there and talked to him, I realized that he has no idea who he is, right? And I think that's the key, is that when I walk with our young guys in community, or I work with the poor, we work with drug addicts, or we go around preaching, and this sounds intense, but we're just experiencing an identity crisis all across the board. Men have no idea who they are.
Yeah.
They have, it's an identity crisis. They have no idea what their inheritance is, what they've been given by God. Like as you know, Born of Fire, the book, it kind of talks about it doubles down on the gift of baptism. You ask just a normal Catholic what baptism is, they have no idea.
Yeah. What
the gift of baptism is, right? And what that means for our inheritance and God dwelling in us and being alive in us. And so we have no idea who we are. We're walking around, and there's a woundedness about that. There's a heaviness about that. And so, my brothers, one of the joys of my life is these young men showing up to religious life and speaking the truth and blessing over them, that they are sons of the Father, and that they have received an inheritance, and God, this is true. And I'm assuming in your ministry, or in your families, your kids, that it's difficult sometimes, because what's true doesn't necessarily mean people can receive it, right? They're like, well, Father, I just had a tough day and prayer is hard. Yeah, okay, but it's still true. God, like the Father's real, and you are a son, right? We're so kind of captivated by our emotions, and they're dominant, and like, oh, prayer's dry, Father. Yeah, like, okay, like, yeah, for me too. Or like whatever it is, like everybody's quick to judge their and to kind of be stuck in their struggle, and they forget what's real. That's deeper than the struggle. That's deeper than consolation, desolation. That's deeper than the circumstances of my life. It's the truth about who you are as a son and daughter of God, and people are longing for that. And so, whether it's with my postulant brothers and novice brothers, or whether it's in the confessional, like when you just speak the truth and bless people with the gift of who they are, they're like, Father, like just no one's told me that. Or just one young man was like, Father, could you say that again? Just tell me again, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the big thing. It's an identity crisis, and young men and women just long to know who they are, and for to have fathers and mothers who just bless them into that.
Yeah. I had an experience like that in the confessional once. I was just having a really hard time in general, and just kind of poured my heart out in confessional, and I was just kind of expecting it to be like just like a lot of other confessions, where
Sure.
it's like I forgive you, and just go in peace or whatever, and just kind of like a quick perfunctory like thing, just kind of like, it's confessions. They sometimes are fantastic, sometimes they're just kind of rote,
Yeah.
But in this case, the priest, I was kind of hanging my head, like all discouraged, and there was no screen this time, so it was just kind of a face-to-face thing, which I'm not, I don't normally experience. And it was this wonderful priest from Africa, and he said, what is your name? And I said, Sam. And he's like, Samuel. He's like the prophet. And he's like, look me in the eye. And I looked him in the eye, and he's like, God is blessing you or whatever. And he like put his hands on my head and like just said the prayer, and just like such a beautifully fatherly way. Like it was just so transformative. It was like a true blessing, fatherly blessing, like you're describing, that was totally different than anything else I had experienced in confession before. And it was truly wonderful. Like it was just the kind of thing that you just kind of like tears came to your eyes. Like yes, this is what I've been longing for,
and the father breaks through, right? The gift of the sacraments is that the Father, like the heavens are opened and you're like, you get a glimpse of the way the Father looks at you. That's Sam. It's just amazing.
Yeah,
it is. And I really like, Sam, what you're bringing up with experience, because that's what I was thinking too, because we see this in our ministry all the time here, is that men don't know, who they are. They don't know who they're supposed to be or who they're called to be. And as such, they put on all sorts of false images or false personalities of life, that's filled with fear, and it's filled with, unknowing, and filled with, a certain sense of inward loathing or sadness, within their hearts. But at the same time, even when we've adopted that knowledge, and that we've accepted the fact that we are, sons of a living God, and adopted sons of a living God, and we were chosen by him to live here and now, and to embrace our roles as masculine men in society. If we don't have that experience, and we haven't come back to that experience, and it stays up here, right, and it doesn't connect with the heart, we find this, we find something else still lacking, right? And now we're requiring our intellect to control us. And I will say, I'm just so grateful for you being here, because I love the CFRs. I love their charisms. Your charism. I had a, let's call it a prejudice, right? My spiritual director for 4 years, who was a great man, was a TOR. And I just assumed that the CFRs were just, posers, and they wish they were as old as the TORs and stuff like that. And then God easily broke through. That wasn't hard to do, because I just started meeting you guys here in Fort Worth, and a lot of your brothers, and your passion for great liturgy, and for beautiful music, and for Brother Isaiah is a good friend of mine, and and like Father Pio's intellect, right? But besides being a skateboarder, but I was asking
he's a
him,
genius.
Yeah. I was like, hey, Father, have you what Vatican II document translation should I read? This is like 10 years ago. And he goes, none of them are good, John. He's like, here. And he pulls out of his, your Franciscan backpack or whatever. He pulls out.
That's what we do right here.
Yeah. And he pulls out his translation of the Vatican II documents with some notes of, things that still have question marks on them and stuff like that. And I was just but that love and that passion, and that's so founded in Christ that you guys have, you just really died yourself. And so I'd like to actually turn to that and say, what does the day in and day out look like as a CFR? And I know it's different depending on which regions you are, but you guys, right? You beg for food, you help the poor, you just really take on a very beautiful depth of poverty, I know, within your own lives. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about that, about your charism, as a Franciscan CFR.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. So we were Franciscan Friars of the Renewal, right? So obviously that word of renewal is going to be big for us. Yeah. A couple of years ago, we got affirmed by the church to be pontifical, which is actually just a really beautiful experience, because the church is actually saying that you guys have a charism, that this is of the Holy Spirit. And so it was beautiful to receive that from the church. And now, speaking of identity crisis, we're not having one, because we know who we are. Like the church has given us the gift of our call to renewal and conversion. And we say, first, that happens in my own heart. Right. So we're authentic men of the gospel who, after following St. Francis, that are deeply committed to personal, ongoing renewal conversion in my own heart. And so the daily getting up, the daily living our consecration and living the gospel, like St. Francis, it's funny. We have them on like the edge on the gospel, right? Because Francis, all he want to do is like, I just want to live like Jesus. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I love teaching the young guys. He's like, we just want to live like Jesus. Take up your cross and follow me. Give up everything you have and come follow me. Right. Now, granted, this is kind of overly simplistic, but who did Jesus want to spend, or who did he spend most of his time with? The poor and his brothers. Right. Like, so the gift of just kind of concretely, radically living the gospel right? And so we're just kind of, we just go all in for that. So our whole day, I like to tell the brothers that first and foremost, we're consecrated for prayer, right? As a consecrated witness, we are called to be men of prayer, right? That's the first thing I love when people are like, so what do you guys like do? we pray. That's what we do, right? From, I get up at 4:30 in the morning and I go to bed at 9:30 at night, and our whole day, the kind of the skeleton is times of real intense prayer before the Blessed Sacrament in my cell by myself and before my icon of Jesus. And we pray the Liturgy of the Hours. We have Mass together every morning. So our whole day is centered on this gift of personal adoration and community prayer, liturgical prayer. And so that's it. If I could stop the conversation there, we pray. From this place overflows the gift of our fraternal life, right? I like to tell people that our fraternal life is not accidental. Like, we just didn't think it was cool one day to like wake up and be like, hey, it'd be kind of cool to live with brothers, right? It's at the heart of the gospel, right? The brothers are God's gift to me to help me go deeper and help me to get out of myself, to help me sacrifice, right? They keep us, they protect us. Our brotherhood protects us from a lot of the dangers of the world, right? It's kind of our family, right? I live with 19 other guys here. And you guys know the CFRs. It's a pretty wild place. It's loud. There's a lot of laughter and it's intense, but it's incredible. But the brotherhood is at the heart of our life. And then from there, we share in our mission that's twofold for serving the poorest of the poor and evangelization, right? So we take care of the poor in a variety of different ways, homeless shelters, youth centers. Our new thing during COVID was we're just kind of doing street walks, evangelization to drug addicts and giving them food and praying with them. And it's wild. I love every minute of it. Yeah. And then also evangelization. We're preachers. We go around, travel the country, giving parish missions and talks and youth retreats. And so, so this is kind of our consecrated life. And again, the expression is very obviously at the heart of it is the way St. Francis lived, and the way we can live that kind of to the best of our ability in 2022.
Awesome. No, I appreciate
That's really cool. I had a kind of I want to get to your book, your Lenten devotional that we that kind of triggered this conversation, the Born of Fire book, and it looks fantastic. But one of the things I want to talk about real quick, so we talked about this hunger that a lot of people are experiencing in kind of the materialistic West. Like, we've got everything at our fingertips. We got Amazon one-click shipping, next day, same day shipping, whatever. We've got everything, all the creature comforts we could imagine. We got our big screen TVs, and yet it's not enough. It's not filling that void, and people are looking for something else. And there's all kinds of movements around here, like and I don't think there's anything wrong with these things, like the kind of minimalist movement, like just get rid of everything and like live in a tiny house and like minimize your life, and that'll like help you find meaning or whatever. Or then you have people who are like, well, don't worry about the simple life, just contribute something to society. So like start a business, whatever. But then there's like this Franciscan simplicity, which kind of mirrors in kind of just a objective sense, like some of the hunger for like the minimalism or like, let's stop being so consumeristic. But yeah, there's something more there. And so I just wonder if you could talk about simplicity for a minute. Like, why this radical poverty? Why this give up everything and just kind of live on in this intense edge of life and just be among the poorest of the poor? I mean, it may not be as cool, like, you guys don't wear black turtlenecks or anything, but you're still living a radically simple, minimalistic life in a sense. So like, what's the attraction there? Like, what's the purpose behind the simplicity, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, because I think people are afraid of poverty and simplicity. And it's just good to say that in the gift of evangelical poverty, gospel poverty that we're all called to follow, it doesn't all look the same for everybody. Right. But we can't deny the fact that Jesus, when he calls his followers, I always say, like, he says, give up everything, but also he says, take nothing for the journey. right? And when he says, I'm going to send you like lambs among wolves, but take nothing for the journey. You're like, hey, I don't get that. Like, I'm not into that. Like, I'm just going to get devoured by this world, but take nothing. And brothers, here's the Franciscan sweet spot is that Francis went all in for Jesus, right? So he cleared the way, like get stuff out of the way, not because he didn't like stuff. It's because we can't deny the fact that the world has an effect on us. And if I fill my life with other things, then silence is really difficult, or prayer is really difficult, or being attentive to my brothers is difficult. And so if we fill our stuff with the world, we can't deny that doesn't have an effect. Right. And so the Franciscan sweet spot is poverty, like sad poverty or poverty and with no relationship is just like miserable. Right. But you clear stuff out of the way. Why? Because we believe that if we lean into this gospel simplicity and poverty, then there's space for a deeper intimacy with the living God. And there's a holy space where I can receive the silence in a deeper way, or I actually spend more time in prayer, and I start to lose attraction for worldly things or for sin, right? Sin, you just don't like conquer sin. Sin is loved out of us. It's in relationship where I'm like, I just like we lose and our appetite for sin or the world because our relationship with Christ. Right. So that's why, it's a simple answer, but poverty and simplicity, we're kind of afraid of it. Like, I have to give up all these things and I'm just going to walk around like empty all the time. It creates a space for relationship. That's my big thing in formation. Like it's all about relationship and identity. And from that place, then we can be like St. Paul. Like I can rejoice and be sad, or I can eat a nice meal. Like when I was recently visiting the Vinas, and they're an incredible family in the Fort Worth area that you guys are connected with. And it was just beautiful to be a part of their family. I was coming from my silent 30-day and kind of simple and being just letting myself be loved. And they're like, do you want ice cream? I'm like, yeah, I want ice cream, But awesome, I can just live in freedom and be like, yeah, like the Father's caring for me here. Right. So the simplicity allows us just to be ourselves, live in relationship, and we're not threatened or controlled by things of the world.
Yeah, it reminds me of something Pope Benedict said. I wish I had the exact words in front of me, but it basically said something like, a lot of people are afraid to open the doors to Christ because they're afraid they're going to lose everything that matters to them. But he's like, you will keep everything that matters to you, and you'll get so much more, in a sense, like when you choose to follow him in that way. And
I think from the gospel, or excuse me, the poverty and the simplicity, I think it's only a kind of effective by witnesses, right? Yeah. You can, again, poverty can be an idea, or simplicity can be an idea, or relationship with God, or we're going to talk about the book, like baptism, like, but if it's just an idea, like I can't fall in love with that. I can't fall in love with an idea. Like and agree again, the gift of the intellect and the Franciscan kind of like, hopefully like a kind of an integration of it all. But when those things are, the world is kind of cleared out, then I can fall in love with the living God.
Yeah, on a day in and day out basis. I think that's really awesome. So I appreciate you sharing that. I do. Let's turn to the desert, and let's turn to where we really remove ourselves from everything, including the comforts of a bed or a blanket or anything like that, and we go into the desert. And so you've written a really powerful book, Born of Fire, and I'm glad that we're able to release this episode before Lent, right? Because the book is for Lent, and we're going to go into it. But for our listeners here, don't be caught unaware, right? Don't be caught off guard that Lent comes March 2nd of this year, Ash Wednesday. And a lot of people are needing that guidance. You're needing that roadmap. You're needing that help. And Father Innocent, you've laid it out here. But before we go into this, what inspired you to write this roadmap for men, which my wife will probably do it with me, but for men, this roadmap here, I'd love to hear about your experience.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you. I have a lot of fire in my heart for this. We're actually doing our own podcast episodes on the book, and So we've been doing those recently, and I just get fired up, and the brothers are like, man, there's something going on. There's some fire in you for this. So yeah, it just means a lot to me. So this whole experience of Born of Fire, going into the desert, or kind of organically developed in my experience of being a formator for the friars. And as I was invited by the community to be a spiritual father to these young men as they enter religious life, I became very aware of their deep desires and how good they are, and how the capacity of their hearts to enter in and to go on this journey of formation. But one thing I realized, that this generation, and you could talk all about this in different ways, but this generation particularly just needs a lot of attention and a lot of intentionality, right? Formation or fatherhood, motherhood, forming children doesn't accidentally happen. You guys know that it takes a lot of intentionality, and we have to be very focused. And with the world we live in, again, with the identity crisis, is that we have a lot of people walking around who have no idea who they are, and they don't really know where the way out is, right? And so when I started walking with these young men, one thing that's again right from the gospel, which is like the simple pitch for it, which I'll get to, but one thing I realized is that formation and to foster an encounter for these young men with God, it's going to have to take place in a drastically different way from what they're used to. Yeah. Right. We have a technology kind of saturated culture. Guys are coming in religious life beat up by the world. I hope that doesn't necessarily scandalize you guys, but young men are coming more and more today, and they're beat up by the world. There's really no young man that's like untouched by the world these days. And they're wounded, and their self-confidence and their self-awareness, right? They're just, we call it, as CFRs, we call it psychological fortitude. Guys aren't that tough, right? They just don't have, this is not necessarily naturally being formed into them by the culture, right? And so we're coming in and we're like, these guys, man, they're such good men. But my two rules is like, don't be weird, and don't be soft. Like, we need guys to be able to make a gift of themselves and to offer not only their hearts, but their lives. Right. A lot of your guys' fatherhood, it's so demanding. It takes everything from your schedule, from the sacrifices of work, from the sacrifices of getting up in the middle of the night, as a father, you just have a ton of responsibility, and it's difficult. And so how do you help guys, inform guys to make a gift of themselves as sons of God, right? Yeah. And so this is what I'm noticing. And so the guys need just kind of this drastic kind of reorientation. And so we learn from Jesus, and we learn from basically salvation history, that God likes to do this. He likes to call his chosen people away and to provide these concrete circumstances where they can let go of everything, be purified, and learn how to relate and live in relationship with him in a new way. Right. Mm. So you guys know that, right? It's all over scriptures, the time of purification in the desert. And obviously, to keep it simple, what I'm inviting people to during this Lent is to go to the desert with Jesus, right? So many of my Lents, it's like my own kind of spiritual Olympics, and I kind of just decide what I'm going to do, and I'm just really self-focused, and I start living Lent, but it's not in relationship. And I want to keep this simple, but going to the desert with Jesus changes the perspective of everything, because Jesus is the only one that can give us what our hearts desire. Jesus is the only one that can teach us. He is the great teacher, right? And so there's two moments that we hold together. As Jesus being the great teacher, the gift of baptism and the gift of the desert, they're so proximate in the gift in the Gospels, right? Jesus, in the gift of his baptism, receives the truth about what has been the truth for him from all eternity, that he is the beloved Son, right? And we get a glimpse into that, right? The gift of the bestowal of an identity, again, the receiving the truth about who he is, right? Immediately he goes into the desert, right? He goes into the desert to be with his Father, to live in this place of identity and sonship, right? And he makes the waters holy for us, but he also makes the desert holy for us. And he's doing it to give us a glimpse in what it means to be a true son, what it means to leave the world, to leave the comforts, to leave the noise, and to bring us to the place before the Father. So this is the movement, and this is what I invite my young brothers to, is that we're going to leave everything behind, and we're going to go to the desert with Jesus, and we're going to face God and face ourselves. And we're going to be in a place of receiving the gift of who we are, maybe for the first time in our lives, but Jesus is going to be our guide, and it's all going to be about identity.
Yeah. No, it's so great. And it's really broken down well in this book. Sam, sorry.
No, yeah, you're fine. I guess I'm just wondering, like, so there's this powerful, like, identity as a son and like being confirmed in that. But you mentioned some of the wounds, in our culture and stuff like that. But what would you say in your experience? Because you preach this, you teach this, you live this. Like, what are some of the obstacles that men face to, again, not only knowing this identity, as we were talking about earlier, but feeling it in a deep way and like being really transformed by it? Because you can know, like, oh yeah, I'm God's son,
and that's why it's cliche for a lot of people. Like, oh, okay, Father. People talk about identity all the time. Oh, I'm a son of the Father. It's great, right? People know it all the time, and that's why I think the criticism of this idea or the book is like, oh, just another book on identity. Oh, everybody's, Father's just going to tell us again that we're beloved sons, right? So it's a great question. Like what's different, right? And I think I love that question, because what happens in the desert, it becomes, when you leave everything and you have to enter into the desert, the difficult, the challenge, the sacrifice, there's no comforts in the desert. And that's what I love about it. When you literally have to let go of everything and you have to face God and face yourself, then that's when things start to come up. And what's interesting, what's just interesting, Sam, is that there's just a reality that self-reliance breaks down pretty quick in the desert. And I think that's that's probably just one of the most poisonous things of masculinity, is just self-reliance. It's an orphan spirit, actually, right? So the orphan, if you don't know you have a father who's good and love you and is gonna give you everything and bless you and gonna protect you, then you start living as an orphan. And the poison that gets in is that I got to do it by myself. I got to protect myself. I got to provide for myself. And so the whole orientation of your life is turned in on you. Yeah. Right. And again, guys, bring that into religious life, the self-reliance, right? But my brothers, if that's not broken, then how can you ever live in a relationship with God and in this radical openness and dependence and receiving everything? When the Father says in the prodigal son, everything I have is yours, like, you could just meditate on that for the rest of your life. Yeah. But if you're closed in and insulated and self-protected, you can't receive that. Yeah. Right. And so in the desert, I love it. And this is funny because you guys probably picked this up by now, but I'm an intense guy and I love life and I love the Friars. Yeah. But we go for it. And I just harder's better and the intensity in the desert. And we're really pushing guys in this, what we call the challenge zone, right? You don't want guys to panic. You don't want guys to psychologically break down. That's the panic zone. Formation doesn't happen there. You want guys to live in the challenge zone where there's just no comfort and they're constantly having to lean into all the challenges. And pretty soon, like, you have guys who we come up to 120-foot cliff and you're rappelling down. And there's no way out. You can't opt out, and you're afraid of heights. All right, hey bro, you can take as long as you need. I'm right here with you. You have the support of the brothers. You take as long as you need, but there's only one way down, and that's down, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they experience their poverty. They experience their lack of control. Like, I'm there, hopefully in a very firm but loving way. Like, bro, this is it. Like, this is the breakthrough for you. Like, do you trust me? Yes, Father, I trust you. You trust the Father? Yes. Okay. Then strap in, turn around, and walk backwards off this cliff. I did it the first time and they're like, yeah, turn around, Father, just gotta walk backwards. And I'm like, well, but but it's again, I'm out of control. I can't rely on myself. I'm absolutely poor. I am so dependent on the guide that is helping me down, my brothers, and trusting. Right. So that's just a small example, Sam, where that's what we see. It's just like the self-reliance. We also see kind of the pride of the ego, right? The desert crushes egos, right? You can make it look good for a while, but there's ways that you just get humbled and crushed, and men need that, right? And as we are humbled, we are built back up by the Father in truth, instead of, again, the pride, the self-reliance, the self-focus. So though, and maybe this, if I could just say this, because I think this resonates in a lot of the young men, is that, there's a lot of brokenness. And so guys come into religious life with a significant, and that's a strong word, but I think it's pretty prevalent that guys don't have the self-confidence. Guys don't have this self-possession, and they don't know who they are, right? And just to be real, like, a lot of guys come with sexual brokenness, right? They've been beat up by sin, they've been beat up by technology, and so they're just beat up by life, and so they just think they're defined by their sins. They think they're defined by their weakness, right? And so the desert comes, and you're just like, well, here it goes again. I don't have what it takes, right? So that lack, that fragility. But I mean, it happens pretty quick, but it's amazing, because when you push guys and with that firmness, and what happens when you might fell, one guy fell in the water. He was stimming across and canyoneering, and he fell in 6 feet of water, and he got wet. Okay. So that's real. That was embarrassing, right? We're talking through it, and tears kind of welling up in his eyes, and he's embarrassed, and he just thinks he's a failure. Well, you know what? 20 feet down the way, you're going to have another opportunity. So tell me about that. Tell me, 5 minutes from now, you're going to have to do it again. Mm-hmm. Guys, he did it. Yeah. He rocked it. Yeah. Right. And after that, I'm like, hey, tell me about what's going on in your heart after you just did that. And he's like, Father, like, I never thought I could do it. The lies in my mind were just like, you're not good enough. You're going to fail. But when you press in and you don't give up and you suffer well, and you actually complete this and you do it, guys, this self-confidence and this new sense of self kind of wakes up in them. And I'm like, man, that's why we come right there. That's why we come. I can't do that in Harlem, guys. I mean, I could rappel off the building, but like, I can't provide spaces like that in Harlem. So those are some examples, but I think that brings me a lot of joy to watch guys go through this journey.
And I'm right that you get to bring the postulants out there yearly, right, to do something along this line. Is it during Lent, or is it just throughout the year sometime?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's actually not during Lent. The book is again the fire in my heart for this, the fire in my heart for the going to the desert with Jesus, going kind of all in for identity and baptism, so that's just kind of the fruit of this journey with the guys. But we actually go for 3 weeks in November. And Great. So the guys get settled September, October. And it's actually really important that we grow in trust for those 2 months. So I just really try to bless them and walk with them and so prepare them well. And then as that trust is built, we go into the desert in November, and you're talking about 70 degrees during the day, which is awesome, but it gets below 0 at night in the desert. And so the cold is the pretty intense, like the struggle there. Yeah. It's awesome. So we don't, it doesn't necessarily match Lent, but we definitely hold the spirit.
Yeah, exactly. And so for the book here, Born of Fire, I really like how you go through Lent, but you also go through the Easter Octave, right? Because there's been, I'm sure, a number of us that have done Exodus 90 or some other form, some Magnificat or something like that, where we've gone through a Lenten experience. And then at the very end, Easter hits and it's like, but now what? right?
Done.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it's that's enjoyable on Sunday and maybe Monday, but then, we want to get back into it because we have that heart for unity with Christ that that is always growing and is always, the depths of it are never ending. And so what next? So I really like that. So if you talk a little bit about the kind of structure of the book, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you bringing up Exodus 90. I know that's borne a lot of fruit for a lot of guys. And I think just a good way to think about the journey here is I just want to be clear that the fire in my heart is to bless guys and I mean, sons and daughters, right? Women are going on this journey as well. But it's the desire of my heart. And I think what the Lord is doing here is really the interior journey, right? So I do take guys to the desert. There's a lot of intense physical activity. You're going to read about some stories and the examples, but that's all an on-ramp to the interior life. That's all an on-ramp. So my deep desire for men during Lent is to help them pray, to help them go deeper in their interior life. So I do think Born of Fire is this kind of interior, the accompaniment in the interior life in the gift of prayer. And so I don't go kind of all in on like, okay, here's what your day is going to look like and fasting and things like that. I do speak about that, but it is a real invitation to prayer. I think we've wasted far too many Lents not going to the interior place. And so if one guy just goes deeper in prayer this Lent, it'll all be worth it. But it's the invitation to the interior journey. So what we do here is, I call it an identity pilgrimage, right? And I don't have like a corner on the market here, as you guys notice. Probably it is the natural journey of man, but I do think it's an insight to our life. Like I studied a lot of Christological anthropology, right? Like Christ reveals man fully to himself. That was John Paul II's favorite thing to say. Only in Christ does man come to know himself, right? So Jesus lived these identities of his masculine heart. And he is the teacher and we want to learn from him, right? So we start with the identity of son, and the identity of son, as you guys know, is the foundational identity. If we don't get this one right, you don't get any of the others right. Jesus is the Son of the Father. Eternally, he is son. Like that's true, right? So the gift of sonship is so profound because we constantly have to live in this posture as sons. We are sons of such a good Father, a perfect Father who loves us and gives us everything. And we live in this place constantly. Our own personal prayer, this is the posture. But as you guys know, again, maybe in your own life as sons and now fathers, is that pretty quickly, I heard a great line that one of the greatest gifts that a mother and father can give an only child is the gift of another brother or sister. And there's a perspective change, right? Because now I'm not the center of mom or dad's existence, but so I have a brother or I have a sister. So Jesus teaches us now what it means to, the gospel command to love God and your neighbor, right? It goes together. So you have this perspective change that now life is not just about me, but now the son becomes a brother. And I have to learn and to love and to experience this person next to me as he loves God or he encounters the world, right? So that makes sense, but the gift of brotherhood. So I talk a lot about the Good Samaritan, right? Are we moved by the guy on the side of the road, our neighbor, our brother or sister who is struggling or suffering? What's it mean? Like what's other people in my life mean as a brother and how I'm moved by that? Do you guys know brothers become men, right? That pretty can be awkward, but important time of our life where we grow into manhood. We recognize that the deepest desires of our hearts and what it means to love and to sacrifice. So I have the whole third week is about just being a man. I introduced that term grit, right? Passion and perseverance. Men have to be able to do hard things and to give themselves, right? So what it means to be a true man. Before you can be a spouse, right? You got to be a man. And so that the gift of that masculine heart allows us to become spouses, which was the next identity. The gift of spouses is very obviously clear. Every man is made for a beloved. We are made to be men in love. We are made to be captivated by beauty, right? I love teaching our young postulants who are called to be consecrated, right? Mm-hmm. They think that they just have to be like, all right, well, I guess I'll sacrifice marriage and it's a discipline and I'll just kind of suffer through that. But as consecrated men, we're made for beloved too. It's a part of Jesus's heart to sacrifice himself for his bride, and to, again, to have the one that your affections and your heart are focused on, right? Jesus is my beloved. He is the one that I've given my heart, my soul, my body to, right? And obviously the gift of that, the deep spirituality there, but I'm made to have someone who is the object of my love. And what that means to live that spousal identity, just like Jesus, who lays down his life in love for his bride, the church. So obviously, spouses become fathers, right? And just to note that I really think we have to be careful here is because in formation, especially in the church, I do think we talk a lot about sons becoming fathers, which is obviously good, but you can't be a father without being a spouse. Right. Like we talk a lot about fatherhood, but if you're not in love, if you don't grow in this relationship with your wife, or and go all in on being radically in love with your spouse or your beloved, like kids don't just make sense. It doesn't have a context. Right. So, the gift of a man becoming a spouse and spouses become fathers, like it's just beauty. It's just beautiful because it just flows through that love, right? So sons become fathers, yes, but we have to live in that beautiful gift of being a spouse, and in our context of our fatherly hearts kind of makes sense from there, right? If you guys took your wives out of the picture, yes, you're a father, but it doesn't make that much sense.
Yeah.
Right. And so that kind of the natural part of the identity pilgrimage. And then I add those 2 other weeks, being a mystic and being the new man. Yeah. And what's beautiful about being a mystic, I note in the book that it's not like it comes after you're a father, right? It's actually the identity that's kind of at the heart and the fire and the fuel for them all. And that's where we get the gift of our baptism, right? The indwelling Trinity, the mystical life that we're all called to double down on the promise that God lives in me, the power of the Holy Spirit. Pentecost happened for me and this is real. And so then I can live a mystical life with God in prayer, and I can be transformed by him. And so the gift of being a man of prayer. And then that last week of the Easter Octave, again, I'm grateful for your feedback there, because it meant a lot to me that I don't want to stop at Easter. Like the Easter Octave is celebrating and going deeper in what it means to be a man of the resurrection, to be a man to be the new man in Jesus. That's constant. That every time I receive the Eucharist, this happens in me. I'm the new man in Jesus. Go to confession. Every time I'm living the gospel, I'm this new man where the resurrection is happening. So that's the quick view. I'm sorry if that was kind of a longer view, but that's the identity pilgrimage.
That's exciting. No, I think it's great. I love the how you laid it out for us here and any of our listeners, because now we all have kind of a precursor understanding of what we're getting into and that process that we're taking. And it's always very helpful for me.
Yeah. So, awesome. That's some pretty profound stuff there. And I think everybody would benefit from this book, like you mentioned, women too, but this book is kind of oriented mostly for men, and I think that men need this. We need to develop our interior life. We can be so externally focused. We can be so focused on doing, and when you talk about identity, it's more about being. It's more about who you are when you're not doing things, and really all of our doing flows from that who we are in those moments of being. And so it's like learning to be a son is so essential to our journey. But I also want to acknowledge, and you've touched on this briefly, but I'd love to hear you expand on it. There's so much brokenness in our world today, and we think about so many young men's experience of fatherhood is tinged by bitterness or disappointment or even anger, where I remember went back a while ago when I was listening to such things, hearing a rap song where he was praising his mother, but he said, "No love for my father because the coward wasn't there." He said the coward wasn't there. Like, where's dad? He's nowhere in the picture. And he was, there's bitterness about that. Like, and a lot of times I think a lot of people didn't have a positive experience of fatherhood. And we bring that to our spiritual life, and it can lead to this scrupulosity or like this hidden resentment towards God as Father, or even just a sense of distance. And so I'm just wondering if you could just expound a little bit on how some of those feelings can be overcome. Like how can young men kind of coming out of the cultural carnage of the world today can kind of overcome some of those wounds?
Yeah, it's awesome. Great question. It's a real struggle, especially for men in formation, is that they are coming with real experiences. I was watching a documentary recently on fatherhood, and there was a spiritual perspective to it. And this great line was that this young man had spent the better part of 40 years trying to wipe the face of his father off of God. Right. And so we are dramatically affected by our own experience of fatherhood. The gift, just to understand like the gift of marriage and motherhood and fatherhood, you guys are icons of the Father. That is built into your spiritual DNA and the gift of your fatherhood, that you are icons of the Father. Just like Mary and Joseph, when Jesus looked at Mary, he saw the Father. When he looked at Saint Joseph, he saw the Father's gaze, right? Motherhood and fatherhood is this. Think of like meditate on that. That's incredible. Like what a gift, right? Your vocation, right? But we realize that with human weakness and human brokenness, there's significant woundedness and limitations, right? And so what God does, I think God has to spend a lot of time early in formation is to help guys to at least starting in with the spiritual life, to come into a place where we can receive in a new way the gift of who we are, right? And so I actually this happened to me personally with my own spiritual director, and my dad is an amazing man, but I, with just the pressure and academics and sports and things like that, like I grew up with an insecurity, like I got to be good enough and I got to look the part and do, like you just kind of have this way of conditional love. And I just carried that into religious life, and I had to prove myself, and I had to please, right? And my spiritual director told me, as we were kind of walking through this, and I was talking about my dad and the struggles, and it was amazing. My spiritual director said, "Hey, listen, like I think we just need to tell people early in the spiritual life when they're growing, yeah, okay, yes, your father struggled and there's limitations, but you have a Father in heaven now. You always had a Father in heaven, but now your focus is on him, right? We need to surrender our fathers and their limitations and let it be what it is. But you're not held hostage by that now, because you have a real Father in heaven who loves you and sees you and bestows this new life of sonship on you." And so that's obvious, but I just always thought that I was kind of carrying my relationship as kind of baggage. And when I came into this new relationship with this newfound grace with God, my Father, I was like, man, like I don't have to I don't have to seek the Father through my dad anymore. I don't have to be worried or kind of, it doesn't have to hinder the way I experience the Father. So it's a simple reality, but what I invite guys to early is just like, okay, like we've been wounded, but we really got to surrender that, because we have a real Father in heaven, and he wants to necessarily kind of start over with you, and to give guys access to a living Father right now. And so then they can start being healed so they can receive what's true. Does that make sense? It's super simple, but I kind of gave my Father to God, and suddenly this space was cleared where I could experience in a more authentic fatherhood of God the Father, right? And so that helped me a lot. And I think again, it's a real struggle in our day and age. And and one other thing, if I could just say, is that when it comes to this, the grace of fatherhood, is that God promises to send us people to remind us who we are.
Yeah.
Right. And so, if you guys think of your own spiritual fathers, priests that have a profound impact on you, or even any religious woman, man or woman, but God sends us people to remind us who we are, right? And so I remember just again that priest in high school, like that was the Father's face, That was a father's mercy. That was his presence who just encouraged me and reminded me who I was and taught me about the Eucharist. Sam, your experience of confession, like, yeah, the Father was just you had a glimpse. The Father was reminding you who you are, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think he promises to do that as well. And I humbly say that that's one of the deepest desires of my heart for men in formation, is that maybe even in my own brokenness, that maybe they could get a glimpse of God the Father, that God could use this relationship to remind them who they are and to see them the way that he does.
Yeah, I love that idea of surrendering our fathers to God's and kind of receiving that fatherhood. But I also think, as my experience of fatherhood, my father had his own brokenness, but I have my own brokenness too. And we can be insecure as sons. We can also be insecure as fathers, where I know I've failed as a father. There's been moments when I've overreacted or been too distant when I should have been engaged, or different things like that. My kids are young, but still that weighs on me at times. Like, am I the dad that I should be? Am I that icon of the father that I should be? And sometimes I feel guilty, like maybe I'm not, or and there's always room for improvement. But even then, to surrender our fatherhood to God and just to let him receive our children, and in spite of our own weaknesses and failures, I think
I love that, because it's not your fatherhood.
Yeah,
it's you have a share in God's fatherhood, right? And I tell a story in the book, in the chapter of fatherhood, where every significant challenge we have, every year we seem to have a pretty dramatic incident that happens. Last year was like a canoe flip, and guys almost got hypothermia. It ended up being fine, but it was intense. Yeah. But what God does in those intense times is somehow I'm not able to kind of be in the situation. The canoe flipped. I had to get out of my canoe to let one of the guys in. So I'm stuck on the other side of the river, and these guys are on the other side on the sandbar. And so they go into hypothermia mode, and all this beautiful stuff is happening where guys are really taking care of each other and comforting each other, because it's intense, right? And we didn't know what was happening, and guys getting out of their wet clothes and getting in 0-degree sleeping bags, and I'm stuck on the other side of the river, and my own fatherhood, I can't do a thing. Mm-hmm. And I felt so poor. But Sam, what's awesome is, just like you said, is that moment was a big grace for me, because Father's because I'm their father. My vocation and my fatherhood is to share in his fatherhood. And so as I watched from a distance, I was totally moved, because God was caring for them, and God was inspiring them to care for one another, and everybody ended up being okay. But I was like, man, that's this person in confession, or your kids, right? It's absolute share in the fatherhood of God for this person in front of me. And so anyway, I love that. It's just all right, I'm going to give you this back because my weakness and my limitations, and it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, Father Innocent, thank you so very much. And I just love listening to you. We could keep on going for sure. And we'll have to have your brother on, one of these times, and have awesome. a duo of
all our listeners.
Yeah, exactly right.
Exactly. He has glasses and he's a little bit more goofy. So, but hey guys, I'm really grateful. Again, just, it means a lot. I'm humbled, and I just sometimes feel like a poor little friar that I just want to help people pray. So I'm really humbled to be with you guys. And I just, to know that there's fathers out there like you, it just gives me a lot of peace, because that's what we need.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and honestly, you're helping us now and in this conversation, and our listeners who'll be listening. So tell our listeners where else they can find you, where they can find this book. We'll put it in the show notes, where they can listen to you more on your podcast, et cetera.
Yeah. Awesome. So just generally franciscanfriars.com, just our website, so you can read about our life. We do, again, we're very humbled to do a pretty fun podcast called Poco a Poco. The brothers are just, we long for it to kind of be a virtual friary where people can just get an inside look on our life and St. Francis, and kind of going deeper. So that's Poco a Poco podcast. But also, if you are interested in the book, it's called Born of Fire. It's bornofirebook.com, bornofirebook.com. And so you can get it there. And just to throw out, it's a part of my heart that if people are doing a group, if getting 5-10 guys together, I'm making myself available to meet with people. It's do a Zoom call if you're getting your guys together during one of the weeks of Lent. So I'd love to do that, to connect with groups that are forming. There's been a lot of great responses from Catholic colleges. And so I'm going to connect with different Catholic colleges throughout Lent. Guys who are 10 or 15 guys who are just going through the book. So that's also a possibility. I'd love to connect with people as I can.
Praise God. Well, thank you so very much for writing it, for taking the time to deliver it to us. And we're going to put this in the show notes, and we hope a lot of our listeners will take advantage of your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom, and the gift that you're sharing to us. So, Father, thanks again for joining us today.
God bless you, brother. And can I give you my blessing?
Yeah, please do.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, I thank you just for my brothers. I thank you for all of our listeners. I just ask you to continue to fill them with the fullness of your Holy Spirit and just bestow on them the gift of their identity as sons of the Father. And may this be the truth about everything for all of us, that we would live from this place in Jesus and with Jesus. And I bless all of you, brothers, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Well, guys, I'm really grateful.
Father. Yeah, God bless you.
Yeah, you got it.
As we like to end every episode.
Be a man, be a saint.